Welcome to Alpha and Omega from the Flood to the Future, the full uncut look at Segment 8, a scientific case for a young Earth and creation.
So picture this. It's 1992, and an expedition heads out to recover a lost squadron of World War II airplanes.
Right, the ones that crash landed in Greenland like 48 years earlier.
Exactly. And the recovery team, they honestly thought they would just, hike out there, brush some snow off the wings, and that'd be it.
Which makes sense. I mean, it had only been 48 years.
Right. But instead, they end up having to use ground-penetrating radar just to locate the planes.
Wait, really? Just to find them?
Yeah, because they were buried beneath 263 feet of solid ice.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of ice for just a few decades.
It is, and that single, honestly baffling discovery is being used in the document we're looking at today to argue that, well, absolutely everything mainstream science tells us about the age of the Earth is entirely wrong.
Yeah, it's a huge leap, but the source makes a really detailed case for it.
Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. I'm your host, and today our mission is to unpack a highly specific, very passionately argued document simply titled Creation 3.Docs.
And I'm here to help break down the mechanics of it. Because this text, it presents a comprehensive argument for young Earth creationism.
Right, which is the belief that the universe isn't, billions of years old, but only thousands.
Exactly. Created in 6 literal days. But before we get back to the mechanics of those airplanes trapped in the ice, it's really worth establishing a clear baseline for you, the listener.
Yeah, because this source, it pulls no punches at all.
It really doesn't. It bridges deeply debated theology and secular science. And our goal today, and we want to be super clear about this, isn't to take a side.
Right, we're definitely not endorsing the viewpoints or, validating the physics here.
Exactly. As your guides for this deep dive, our mission is strictly impartial. We're just here to decode the author's architecture, report on the content provided, and show you exactly how they build this argument piece by piece.
Okay, let's unpack this from the very foundation. Because to understand the author's total rejection of mainstream science, you really have to understand where they start.
And they start right at Genesis 1.4.
Right. The text anchors absolutely everything on what's called divine fiat creation.
Yeah, that's a crucial starting point. The theological term the author emphasizes is ex nihilo.
Which is Latin for out of nothing.
You got it.
Yeah.
The argument here is that the physical universe didn't slowly evolve from a primordial soup or like a compressed singularity.
It was literally just spoken into existence.
Yes. God commands it, and the matter simply appears, fully formed, lacking nothing. The author is drawing a really hard line against any kind of developmental process.
Hearing you describe that, it honestly makes me think of a video game developer.
Oh, how so?
Well, usually if a programmer wants a massive, realistic forest in a game, they write a procedural algorithm,
Yeah.
right? And they just let it generate over a long period of computing time.
Right. It renders slowly.
Exactly. But ex nihilo creation, it's like the developer deciding to just drop a fully formed, highly detailed, mature digital asset directly into the virtual world with a single keystroke.
I like that. That's a great way to picture it.
There's no background rendering process. It just exists.
That captures the author's perspective perfectly. And, because they insist on this instant, fully formed creation, they also insist on a highly specific timeline.
Right. The text points to the original Hebrew word yom used in Genesis.
Yes. The author argues that in this specific biblical context, where the word is modified by the phrase an evening and a morning, linguistic rules dictate it can only mean a literal 24-hour solar day.
Which means they leave, absolutely zero room for the popular middle ground theories.
None whatsoever. The source aggressively dismantles all those theological compromises.
Like theistic evolution, right?
Yeah, the concept that God sparked the Big Bang and simply guided the evolutionary process over billions of years, they completely reject that.
And they throw out the gap theory, too.
Right, which attempts to insert millions of years of geological time right between the first 2 verses of Genesis.
And I notice they are particularly critical of the day-age theory.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the one where people use the verse from 2 Peter 3.8 saying, a day is like 1,000 years to the Lord, to argue that the 6 days of creation were actually long, sprawling geological eras.
Precisely. And the author's counterargument to that is pretty blunt. They say you cannot cherry-pick poetic verses from entirely different books of the Bible to rewrite the historical narrative of Genesis.
They argue it destroys the integrity of the text, right?
Yeah, they claim that twisting the original meaning of words just to accommodate modern secular scientific theories is a massive mistake.
But, I mean, if we accept that premise for a moment, it creates a massive logical hurdle.
The starlight issue.
Exactly. Even as we're talking about this, I'm sure you, the listener, are wondering about the basic physics of the night sky.
It's the first thing most people think of.
Right. If everything was dropped in instantly just a few thousand years ago, how do we see light from galaxies like Andromeda, which are, millions of light years away?
It's a huge problem for a young universe.
Yeah, if the universe is young, that light simply shouldn't have had enough time to travel across the vacuum of space to reach our telescopes.
It is the ultimate starlight conundrum, and the author absolutely knows it.
So how do they explain it?
Well, the source actually provides a multi-layered defense to explain this exact mechanism. The first layer goes right back to your video game analogy.
The mature digital asset.
Exactly. The author argues for a mature creation. According to the text, when God created Adam, he was created as a fully mature adult man.
Right, he didn't grow from an embryo.
He didn't have a childhood. And the author argues the universe was created the exact same way. The light from distant stars was created in transit.
Wait, in transit?
Yeah, like the beam of light was already connecting the star to the Earth on day one.
Okay, I mean, that makes logical sense within their specific framework, but it feels like it just bypasses the physics rather than answering them. Does the author offer any actual mathematical models?
They do, actually. They move from theology straight into theoretical astrophysics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the text cites theories suggesting the speed of light itself is not a constant. The author posits that at the moment of creation, light might have traveled 10 billion times faster than it does today.
10 billion times. That's incredible.
And then, due to the cosmological effects of the biblical fall of man, which the author views as a literal event that corrupted the entire fabric of the universe, the speed of light decayed.
It slowed down.
Right, slowing down to the 186,000 miles per second we observe today.
So they're arguing for a decaying speed of light. Are there other models they use?
Yes, definitely. The source highlights the work of astrophysicists like Russ Humphreys and John Hartnett.
Okay, what do they propose?
They use Einstein's theory of general relativity to propose time dilation models.
Right, relativity. Because gravity distorts time.
Exactly. If you have a massive gravitational well, time moves slower there compared to somewhere with less gravity.
Okay, so how does that apply to the creation week?
Well, these creationist physicists argue that if the Earth is situated near the center of a bounded, expanding universe, the gravitational forces would cause a massive time dilation effect.
Meaning time would be ticking at two completely different speeds.
Exactly. Under this model, during the creation week, billions of years of physical time could have passed at the distant edges of the expanding universe.
Allowing for star formation and light travel.
Yes, while only 24 hours actually passed on Earth.
Okay, but if physicists have actual mathematical models for this based on Einstein's relativity, why is it completely absent from mainstream science curricula?
Well, what's fascinating here is the author's explanation for that exact absence. The text claims there is a deliberate suppression of these time dilation theories in public schools and universities.
The deliberate suppression. Why?
The author argues that the secular scientific establishment refuses to teach these concepts because acknowledging them would lend scientific credibility to the Bible.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the fear, according to the source, is that if the physical history of Genesis is proven mathematically viable, it forces culture to confront the moral and spiritual authority of the rest of the text.
Wow. Okay, but if the author is willing to radically reinterpret cosmic clocks like the speed of light, they obviously cannot ignore the physical clocks scientists use right here on Earth.
You mean dating methods?
Exactly. I'm talking about the dating methods that tell us dinosaur bones are 65 million years old.
And they don't ignore them. A massive portion of this document puts secular dating methods on trial.
Right. To validate a young Earth, they systematically attempt to dismantle the mechanisms behind an old Earth.
They start with the ground we walk on. Geologic strata dating.
Yeah, the author dismisses the dating of sedimentary rock layers as a pure fallacy of circular reasoning.
How do they figure that?
Well, the argument is that secular paleontologists use the assumed age of a rock layer to date the fossil found inside it. But when asked how they know the age of the rock, the geologists point to the evolutionary age of the fossil inside it.
So the author claims it's a closed loop, masquerading as objective science.
Exactly. But the author's most aggressive critique is aimed at the actual isotopic clocks. specifically radiocarbon or carbon-14 dating.
Right, the mechanism of carbon dating. It relies on measuring the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-14 in a dead organism.
Because while an animal is alive, it breathes in both, right?
Yeah, and when it dies, the carbon-14 slowly decays into nitrogen. So by measuring how much carbon-14 is left, scientists calculate how long the animal has been dead.
But the author claims that math is fundamentally broken, because scientists are forced to make massive, unprovable assumptions about what that original ratio of carbon was thousands of years ago.
Right, because if the atmosphere was different.
Exactly. If the Earth's atmosphere was vastly different in the past, say before a global biblical flood, the starting amount of carbon-14 would be entirely different, which would skew the math completely.
And the text brings receipts for this. The anomalies they list are honestly bizarre.
Oh, they are wild. According to the document, in 1963, living mollusk shells were carbon dated, and the results came back saying they were 2,300 years old.
Living shells. And in 1971, a freshly killed seal was carbon dated as having died 1,300 years ago.
And it gets crazier. In 1984, shells from living snails were tested, and the carbon dating results indicated the snails were 27,000 years old.
Wait, living snails. How does the author explain a living, breathing organism testing as ancient?
The author points to contamination, diet, and atmospheric variations as massive blind spots in the testing methodology.
Basically saying the system is flawed from the jump.
Exactly. The argument is simple. If carbon dating fails this spectacularly on living or recently deceased creatures where we already know the true age, it is scientifically reckless to trust it for organisms that died thousands of years ago where we have no baseline.
And the author applies this exact same skepticism to radiometric dating too.
Right, the method that measures radioactive isotopes like potassium argon to date volcanic rocks.
And again, they provide examples of massive discrepancies. The text cites Sunset Crater in Arizona.
Oh, yeah, this one is interesting.
According to the source, rocks from that crater were radiometrically dated at 200,000 years old, yet human historical records and tree rings show the eruption happened less than 1,000 years ago.
That's a huge margin of error.
Even more striking, the author points to rock samples taken from the Mount St. Helens eruption. We know for an absolute fact that rock was formed in 1980, but the document claims it was radiometrically dated at 300,000 years old.
Which brings us directly back to the ice of Greenland.
Yes, the Lost Squadron.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because after attacking rocks and carbon, the author takes on ice core drilling.
That's the method where scientists drill deep into polar ice caps and extract those long cylinders of ice, right?
Right, and they count the visible rings in the ice, which are called varves. The mainstream scientific consensus is that each ring represents one annual cycle of summer and winter snow accumulation.
Very similar to tree rings.
Exactly. By counting down, they map out hundreds of thousands of years of Earth's climate history.
But to debunk this mechanism, the author uses the story of those planes.
Yeah. When that wealthy team from Kentucky finally located the P-38 Lightning fighter planes they had abandoned during World War II, they found them encased under 263 feet of ice.
And this is the crux of the author's argument. According to the standard ice core dating math that secular scientists use, a depth of 263 feet, containing hundreds of individual rings or varves, is supposed to represent over 1,800 years of time.
But everyone involved knew for an absolute fact it had only been 48 years since the pilots left those planes on the surface.
It completely breaks the model.
It's like finding a tree, counting 50 distinct rings, and assuming the tree must be 50 years old, only to discover later that this specific species of tree actually grows a brand new ring every single time it rains.
That's a great analogy. The mechanism the author is highlighting is that these ice rings do not represent annual solar years. They represent individual hot and cold weather cycles.
Like a snowstorm followed by a thaw, followed by another freeze.
Exactly. The author argues that in extreme environments like Greenland or Antarctica, you can have dozens of these distinct cycles in a single year.
So a core with 100,000 rings does not mean 100,000 years.
Right. It might just mean a few thousand years of highly volatile weather.
Wow. Okay, but if the author completely rejects all these secular clocks, they can't just leave a void. They have to prove a young Earth using entirely different physical metrics.
And they do. The text pivots to lay out several specific scientific anomalies as affirmative evidence for an Earth that is only 6,000 to 10,000 years old.
Where do they start with that?
They actually start by looking up at the rotation of galaxies. The author calls it the winding up dilemma.
The winding up dilemma. How does that work?
It comes down to the physics of spiral galaxies, like our own Milky Way. The inner stars of these galaxies rotate around the center much faster than the outer stars.
Okay, tracking with you.
According to the source, if our galaxy were actually 10 billion years old, as mainstream science claims, that differential in speed would have wound the galaxy up so tightly that it would be a smooth, featureless disk of stars by now.
Oh, I see. But we still have spiral arms.
Exactly. The fact that we still clearly see distinct spiral arms is presented as mechanical evidence that the galaxy cannot be billions of years old.
That's fascinating. And then the text comes crashing back down to Earth and looks at the dirt in the ocean.
Yes, specifically the mathematics of mud and salt.
Right. The author notes that every year, water and wind erode about 25 billion tons of dirt and rock from the continents, dumping it into the oceans as mud.
That's a lot of mud.
It is. But through plate tectonic subduction, which is the process where the seafloor physically slides beneath the continental plates, taking mud with it, only about 1 billion tons of that mud is actually removed from the ocean floor.
Leaving a net gain of 24 billion tons of mud every single year.
Exactly. The author does the math. They say if the Earth were 3 billion years old, the oceans would be choked with dozens of kilometers of mud. They wouldn't be oceans, they'd be global swamps.
But they aren't.
No, the seafloor only has a fraction of that sediment, and they apply the exact same mathematical formula to sodium levels, too.
Based on the salt entering the sea from rivers versus the amount leaving.
Yeah. The author calculates the absolute maximum age of the oceans to be 42 million years, not 3 billion. And they credit the massive, rapid runoff from the biblical Genesis flood for depositing the bulk of the levels we see today.
The source also tackles physics directly, pointing to the Earth's magnetic field.
Oh, right.
The text claims that the total energy stored within the magnetic field is decaying rapidly. The author states it has decreased by a factor of 2.7 over the past 1,000 years.
So if you reverse that math...
Working that decay rate backward, the magnetic field would have been so impossibly strong just a few thousand years ago that the Earth's structure couldn't have survived it.
Which caps the maximum possible age of the Earth at 10,000 years.
Precisely. And one of the most vivid pieces of affirmative evidence they use involves the Apollo moon landings.
Oh, the moon dust.
Yes. The author explains that prior to 1969, mainstream scientists believed the moon was 3.5 billion years old. Because space dust and solar wind constantly erode lunar rock, they calculated that over 3.5 billion years of undisturbed accumulation, the moon should be covered in a layer of loose dust that was literally miles deep.
Miles deep?
Yeah. The text claims that Neil Armstrong was legitimately terrified that the lunar module would just sink into the moon like dry quicksand.
But when he stepped off the ladder...
There were only a few inches of dust. For the author, that missing dust is definitive proof of a young solar system.
So the author builds this framework of a young universe using astronomy, geology, and physics. But all of this battle over time, over clocks and strata, it's ultimately just a staging ground, isn't it?
It really is. It leads directly to the author's primary target, the theory of human evolution.
Yeah, the text calls the fossil record woefully inadequate and claims it is largely built on imagination and outright hoaxes.
The author goes right down the list of famous Latin names that we've all seen in textbooks, the supposed missing links, proving the transition from ape to man.
And dismantles the mechanics of how they were identified.
Exactly. A prime example the text uses is Nebraska Man. The author points out that scientists constructed an entire evolutionary species, complete with illustrations of ape-like humans in popular magazines, based entirely on the discovery of a single, solitary tooth.
Wait, one tooth?
One tooth. And years later, further excavations revealed that the tooth didn't belong to a primate at all. It belonged to an extinct species of wild pig.
A pig's tooth. It's incredible how much weight is put on a single fragment. And they apply that same scrutiny to the famous Lucy fossil, right?
Yes, they do. The author argues that Lucy is mechanically and anatomically nothing more than an extinct ape.
They point to the locking wrist, don't they?
Yeah, features like locking wrists, which are designed for knuckle walking, not upright human bipedalism. They also quote Lord Zuckerman, a famous British anatomist who studied the fragments of Australopithecus for 15 years.
And what did he conclude?
He concluded it was nothing but an ape. The text even mentions Pithecanthropus, known as Java Man or Peking Man, noting that many scientists now believe those fragments were related to gibbons, not humans.
So the author's conclusion is that there are 0 actual transitional forms.
0. And to back that up, The author leans heavily on quotes from mainstream secular scientists.
Right. They quote anthropologists like David Pilbeam, who stated that there is no clear-cut pathway from ape to human.
Pilbeam is quoted as saying that generations of students of human evolution have been flailing about in the dark, and that their published theories are more statements about their own ideology than about the actual past.
And they quote Mary Leakey saying it's impossible to fit the known fossils into a reliable evolutionary pattern.
The author's synthesis here is critical to understanding the entire document. They are arguing that evolutionary scientists are starting with a rigid, unbending ideology, the assumption that evolution must be true.
And then they're just forcefully molding bone fragments to fit the predetermined drawings they want to publish.
That's exactly.
Which raises a fundamental question. Why does the author care so deeply about this? I mean, why dedicate thousands of words to dissecting carbon decay rates, or the subduction of ocean mud, or the anatomy of a pig's tooth?
It's a great question. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author's entire argument boils down to a fierce rejection of what they view as two massive cultural lies.
Okay, what's lie number one?
Lie number one is that life is random, that there is no creator, no intentional design, just blind, purposeless chance.
And lie number two?
Lie number two is that truth is relative, that because we are just evolved animals, there is no absolute moral authority governing right and wrong.
Ah, I see.
The author firmly believes that secular science uses the theory of evolution and the concept of deep time to validate those two lies, giving society intellectual permission to live without accountability to a creator.
And that leads to the ultimate theological conclusion of the text. The author wants to establish the absolute scientific truth of Genesis to establish the absolute spiritual truth of biblical redemption.
Right. They are inseparable for the author.
To illustrate this, the text shares a story about the theologian R.C. Sproul. Sproul was once answering questions at a university when a student challenged him on John 14.6, where Jesus says he is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one comes to the Father except through him.
And the student was offended, right?
Yeah, the student asked, why does there have to be only one way? What if God gave us 5 ways?
And Sproul completely reframed the mechanics of the question.
He did. Sproul asked the student, why would God even give us one way at all, as opposed to no way?
Wow.
The argument is that a holy God was under no obligation to provide any path to redemption for a rebellious creation. But, Sproul argues, he provided one out of immense, unmerited love.
So for the author of this text, acknowledging the scientific literalism of a young Earth is deeply, inextricably intertwined with acknowledging the truth of that love.
Exactly. In their worldview, if the physical history of Genesis is a myth, the spiritual rescue mission of the Gospels is meaningless. You cannot separate them.
As we synthesize everything we've unpacked today, I really want you, the listener, to reflect on why a text like this matters to you.
Yeah, even if you completely and utterly reject every single scientific conclusion the author draws.
Exactly. Because this document is an absolute masterclass in understanding how foundational worldviews operate. A worldview acts as a lens.
It changes how you see the data.
Completely. Whether you are looking at the varves of a World War II airplane trapped deep in the ice, or the speed of a spiral galaxy spinning in the dark of space, or the anatomical ridges of a fragmented bone pulled out of the dirt, the facts that you perceive are entirely shaped by the baseline assumptions you bring to the table before you ever look through the microscope.
So what does this all mean for you? I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you step back into your day. The author passionately argues that mainstream science is so blinded by its baseline assumptions that it cannot see the mechanical truth right in front of it.
Right.
But take a look at your own daily life. Think about the media you consume, the data you read, the narratives you inherently trust. How often are the facts that you implicitly accept actually just interpretations?
Interpretations that have been deeply colored by your own unexamined, tightly held assumptions.
Exactly. Are you just counting the rings in the ice, absolutely certain you know what they mean without realizing it might just be raining? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it challenged you, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you for joining us for the full uncut version of Segment 8, A Scientific Case for a Young Earth and Creation. Check the profile library for more, and the full uncut briefing is in the vault.